Hello everyone, my name is Dominic Sung. Today I will be talking about osmoregulation and the kidneys. The topics being covered today are the structure of the urinary system, the structure of the kidney, the nephron, and the role of ADH. The urinary system has two key functions. The first being to filter out any waste products within the blood and expel it from the body as urine. The second is in order to control the blood water levels of the body through osmoregulation. The urinary system consists of two kidneys, which are connected to the bladder. The tubes joining the kidney and bladder together is known as the ureter. They help to transport urine from the kidney into the bladder to be stored. On top of this, each kidney is attached to the renal artery and the renal vein. The renal artery, which comes from the aorta and delivers oxygenated blood to the kidney, then the renal vein delivers deoxygenated blood from the kidney to the vena cava. There are three sections of the kidney: the cortex, which is the outermost region, the medulla, which is the inner section of the kidney, and the renal pelvis, which links the kidney to the ureter. Within each kidney, there are almost a million tiny structures called nephrons. They begin in the cortex, loop down into the medulla, and back up to the cortex. The contents of the nephrons will drain into the renal pelvis, and eventually the urine that's collected flows into the ureter, which flows into the bladder for storage. A nephron is made of four main parts: the Bowman's capsule, the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, and the collecting ducts. In the kidney, the blood filtering process is split into three smaller processes: ultrafiltration, selective reabsorption of glucose, and reabsorption of water and salts. The first step, ultrafiltration, begins when smaller arteries, called arterioles, branch off the renal artery. They end up forming a knot of capillaries called the glomerulus, which sits inside the Bowman's capsule. These capillaries become narrower the further you go into the glomerulus, increasing the blood pressure. This forces out small molecules like glucose, water, urea, and salts out the capillaries and into the Bowman's capsule. The combination of all these molecules form what is called the filtrate. After the filtrate enters the Bowman's capsule, it moves down to the proximal convoluted tubule. This is where glucose is reabsorbed back into the blood via active transport. In order to generate enough ATP for active transport to occur, the nephron has adapted by having many mitochondria which can perform cellular respiration to produce ATP. Keep in mind that the proximal convoluted tubule is the only area where glucose can be reabsorbed. People with diabetes cannot control their own blood glucose levels, as they cannot produce their own insulin. This causes their blood glucose levels to be very high. Not all of this glucose can be filtered out, and since the proximal convoluted tubule is the only place where glucose can be reabsorbed, it remains in the filtrate and ends up in the urine. This is why one of the first tests a doctor may do to check if someone is diabetic is to test their urine for the presence of glucose. As the filtrate moves through the loop of Henle, necessary salts are reabsorbed back into the blood by diffusion. After the salts are reabsorbed into the blood, it forms a concentration gradient which allows water to enter the blood by osmosis. The reabsorption of water also occurs in the collecting ducts, albeit in different amounts depending on how much water the body needs at a certain time. Osmoregulation is important because the cytoplasm that makes up the majority of a cell is water. So if there are any major changes to solute or water concentration, it would have large effects on our cells. If the outside of a cell has a higher water potential than the inside, then it makes the cell swell up with water and become turgid. And if the inside of a cell has a higher water potential than the outside, then the cell would lose lots of water and become plasmolyzed. ADH is a hormone that is produced by the pituitary gland in the brain. It affects the permeability of the collecting ducts in the kidney, and affects how much water is reabsorbed. The amount of ADH produced depends on the amount of water present in the blood. If the blood water level is too low, then more ADH is produced to make the kidney collecting duct more permeable, and thus more water is absorbed into the bloodstream. That is the end of my presentation. I hope you've learned something, and I wish you a good day.